So as we approach Buddhist practice, we may have heard about a judgmental distinction between skillful and unskillful mental states or efforts, and also the idea of non-judgmental awareness. And these two may seem in some kind of a conflict. So we're going to try to unpack some of that on today's talk coming up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. And if you're interested in helping to promote a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled world, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll have talks like this out every Monday and most Thursdays. So if it interests you, consider subscribing and you won't miss them. So in early Buddhism, we may have seen a kind of an emphasis on judgment, on making the right kinds of judgment between skillful and unskillful states. And I think this is highlighted by one particular sutta, the sutta on two kinds of thinking. And this is a sutta where the Buddha talks about his life before he became awakened, when he became aware of the fact there were certain kinds of mental states that he had that he found were harmful to him and to others. And there are other mental states that he had that were not harmful, that were in fact helpful to him and to others. And these are the sort of unskillful and skillful states. So he became aware that states of ill will, that states of sensual desire or greed were harmful, that states of cruelty were harmful both to himself and to others, and that their opposites, that is, states of compassion, states of kindness, states of generosity and renunciation, were helpful both to himself and to others. And that it was by making this distinction that he was able to get a start along the path that eventually led him to awakening. And that process is one that he describes with a simile in that particular sutta. He talks about the simile of a cowherd who has his herd of cows. And the cowherd, in order to do a good job, has to keep the cows out of the crops, out of the fields that the farmers are trying to till. As long as the cowherd keeps these cows out of the field, everyone's happy and the world goes well. However, if the cowherd neglects his duties, then the cows will tend to wander into the field and eat the crops, and that ends up causing him pain, causing the farmer pain. He may be dealt with fines or whatever for having destroyed crops. So in the same way that the skillful farmer is active in keeping the cows out of the field, so too the skillful practitioner is active in keeping the mind away from the unskillful states and keeping them towards the skillful ones. And this, in fact, is the heart of right effort. Right effort being one of the key of the Eightfold Paths, one of the key parts of the Eightfold Path. And I have a video on right effort that I made, which I can link up here somewhere. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, you can go and watch that video. Now, on the second half of this issue, we have the concept of non-judgmental awareness, where in meditation, in particular, although it can, in fact, extend to all of life, because meditation, in fact, can be something we do at every moment, we're supposed to hold the world in a kind of awareness that is without judgment. So it's often said that the problems we have in the world, the dukkha, the pain that arises in us, arises due to our judgments. And that if we can hold this world in a non-judgmental but kind way, without seeing distinctions between good and bad or right and wrong or certain kinds of people and other kinds of people, that we will in fact be doing the right thing. Now, interestingly, I think in the early Buddhist suttas, I don't think you find mention of such a thing as non-judgmental awareness. On the other hand, the great translator and scholar Analyo, who has recently written a book about Satipatthana, which is the foundations of mindfulness that I have referenced many times in these videos, he mentions what he calls non-reactive awareness. And his point is that within Satipatthana, within mindfulness, is this idea that we were supposed to cultivate an awareness that was non-reactive. And I think this is an interesting distinction from the idea of non-judgment, because in that view, at least as I would gloss it in my interpretation, it wasn't so much that we weren't making judgments. I mean, we were making judgments perhaps between certain mental states that were hindrances to meditation, others that were not, or that were fruits of meditation, let's say. So it's not that we weren't making distinctions, but rather that we were holding them in a mind of non-reactivity. That is, we were not backing away from the mental states that were painful. We were not clinging to the mental states that were pleasurable. Because it's that tendency to cling or to react against, to be aversive, that are the problems, rather than judgment per se. And it seems to me that the idea of non-judgment may have arisen in the later tradition along with the notion of non-dual thinking. So this idea that all dualities were to be overcome as one approached awakening. And the same idea, this is sort of seems to be supported by the idea that we should foster a kind of non-judgment, an awareness of non-judgment. That is, an awareness that doesn't have judgment within it. But it seems like we have then two kind of opposing ideas. One is an idea of judgment, and the other is an idea of non-judgment. And is there a way to synthesize these? And I think there is. The synthesis is in a kind of, I would say, a wise right effort, a wise effort that we make. Insofar as we allow judgment to make us reactive, it becomes problematic, it becomes a problem. Because insofar as we're reactive, we cease to see things as they are. We cease to see, in particular, the mind, our own mind, as it really is. We cease to be able to distinguish between truly skillful and unskillful mental states, because when an unskillful mental state arises, we react against it, we push it away, we're aversive towards it, perhaps we suppress it. And once we do that, then we're not aware of it when it's around because we tend to turn away from it. And similarly, when skillful mental states arise, we may have the tendency to cling to them, to try to keep them around, to become jealous of them, as it were. I mean, to hold them jealously. And that is also not skillful for keeping them around. It will tend to make them disappear and disintegrate because it substitutes an unskillful for a skillful mental state. So in that sense, the non-reactivity is part of our investigation. It's part of the process that we put into investigation of these mental states, which itself is part of the path, this kind of investigation. So in that sense, a non-reactive, or non-judgment if we understand judgment in this kind of emotionally reactive sense, is right effort. It is exactly the effort we need to put when we're coming towards these mental states within meditation. And once we have done that, it will reveal the states as they really are. It will reveal the unskillful ones as unskillful because we won't be reacting against them. And then, having done that, we get to a point where we can put effort properly into the right mental states to try to deal with them as unskillful states, and similarly with skillful ones. So, non-judgmental awareness or non-reactive awareness is a critical part of right effort. It's a critical part of our seeing mental states as they really are. It's a critical part to coming to terms with the distinction, with the two kinds of mental states, with the skillful and unskillful, seeing them as skillful and unskillful, and dealing with them effectively and wisely. And I think that's the way, or one way, that we can, in a moment-by-moment basis, bring ourselves to a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled existence in this world. So what's been your own meditative experience with these kinds of states? Have you seen a usefulness in non-reactivity and non-judgment when you're coming at them? Have you seen a usefulness in distinguishing between skillful and unskillful? I'd be interested to hear, and I'm sure everyone else would as well. So I hope this has been useful. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here. If you're coming back, thanks for coming back, and thanks for the wonderful comments and questions. I always love reading them. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.